Joining BYU Sports Nation, the man who will call the game on ESPN tomorrow, Bob Wischusen. Bob, welcome to BYU Sports Nation. How you doing?
Thanks, guys. I'm good. How are you?
We are fantastic. We ask this to all the guys that come over from the east to the Wasatch Mountains, but have you prepared adequately for the elevation change in Provo, Utah?
Yeah, I did stairs before I came out here as best I could. So I think I'm in shape. I think I can handle it.
It hits you in the second half. That's when it really gets you.
Exactly. Well, we'll have oxygen in the booth. It'll be fine.
BYU ranked number 21 right now, kind of the non-P5 darling. Central Florida, Boise State haven't really helped the non-P5 cause, so BYU sticks out a lot. How is BYU perceived on the East Coast as a New Jersey native?
Well, I mean, everybody, obviously, if you know anything about college football, knows BYU, knows the history, knows the tradition, knows how this program, if you ever think that you're going to have a nice, easy out-of-conference win, schedule a game against BYU, think again, because obviously it's a great program. But, you know, when you think about it in terms now of this college football playoff, it's really hard to not be in a conference unless you're Notre Dame. And, you know, it's kind of mythical that Notre Dame isn't in a conference. Notre Dame is in a conference. They're in the ACC. They're guaranteed 6 ACC games a year. Plus, they've got their natural rivals like USC. So, I mean, obviously, they're going to have those other big BCS, level Power 5 conference games. For BYU, it's hard. I mean, if you're an SEC team, an ACC, a Big 12 team, and you know you're going to get a really good, hard conference test every year, you're going to schedule a couple of out-of-conference games that are going to give your guys a test and certainly chase the TV money at times. But it's hard for BYU to schedule 7, 8, or 9 of those. You can get 3 of them, but you can't get enough of them, I think, to, even if you go undefeated, be able to put together enough quality wins that at the end of the year, that committee is going to be saying, well, we've got BYU 12-0, Auburn 11-1. How do you not put Auburn in the playoffs? So it's going to be an uphill climb for them.
So is it just kind of a cute story since you're suggesting, if you can't make the playoff, what's the point?
Well, I mean, they're always going to be a factor, but, I think it's really hard if you're not in a conference to put together, because now all we're hearing about the committee is that they are, now we'll see, this is the first year of it, so we'll see what actually comes out of that room eventually when they determine what their standings are and they start putting out polls at the end of October, and then when we finally get a 14 playoff. But we've heard now that this is going to be treated like basketball. They're going to look at your resume. They're going to look at your strength of schedule. They're going to look at who you played. They're going to look at whether or not you're a team that went out there, like, say, a Michigan State, and maybe they lost at Oregon, but at least they took the game against Oregon rather than, Saginaw Valley State at home winning 78-0. So, if you've got those kind of games on your schedule, theoretically the committee's going to penalize you for it. And for BYU, without having the conference schedule to automatically just slot in every year, all of the games on their resume have to kind of be independently negotiated. That's hard. I mean, I would think it's probably the most daunting task in college football now to put together an independent team's schedule that will be respectable enough for that committee come selection time, even if you go undefeated.
Athletic Director Tom Homo certainly has his hands full, and this has been discussed widely because BYU wants to be relevant. They want to make a national splash. They're 3-0 now with a blowout win at Texas, but Texas is down apparently. Virginia comes in riding some hype because of what they did last week. What does BYU have to do to really grab the nation's attention? What is the best-case scenario for the Cougar football team in 2014?
We'll go undefeated. I mean, obviously, every team, it's funny, I don't think that you have to look at not being in the playoff as not being relevant. Boise has never played for the national championship. Last year, Northern Illinois. We've obviously seen, UCF, teams like that over the last several years. No one would ever say those teams were irrelevant. They were very relevant in the college football landscape. They just didn't have enough to get over the top and play, obviously, in the BCS title game because of what their resume at the end of the year read like. For BYU, go undefeated. And they can. If you look at their schedule, there's not a game on their schedule that you would say right now they probably wouldn't be a points favorite in, or at least within a field goal one way or the other. The hardest game on their schedule the rest of the way is probably a game that you would, not go out on a limb at all picking them to win. So if you run the table and you're 12-0 at the end of the season, you're relevant in college football. There's never been an irrelevant undefeated team in college football.
Marshall might be that this year, if there is one ever.
Maybe.
Yeah, but in the modern era, no. When you look at next year's schedule, I'll just lay out some of the teams, and I want to get your opinion on this. Maybe next year's schedule is a little different than this year's. At Nebraska for BYU, Boise State, at UCLA, at Michigan. Then you throw in some non-P5 decent teams, Utah State, Cincinnati, East Carolina. Would a schedule like that be enough to maybe merit the 4 spot in the playoff?
Well, it's hard to say because we have to obviously right now project what those teams are going to be next year. I mean, this year, if you beat Michigan and Nebraska, those are great name teams to beat, but neither one is ranked.
Yeah. It's like Texas.
It's hard to predict what those programs are going to be like when you negotiate these contracts 5, 7, 8 years in advance.
Exactly.
Sometimes. You got to do the best you can and project, who are the traditional powers. Well, 8 years from now, is there a pretty good chance Michigan's going to be ranked in the top 10? Yeah, they're Michigan. Again, if you are in the Big Ten, you're going to play, most likely, Nebraska and Michigan, but you're also going to play Michigan State. You're also going to play Penn State. You're also going to play these monster national, powerhouse-type programs, and it's automatic. It's on your schedule. You're going to play Wisconsin. You're going granted, sometimes you don't play everyone because of the nature of the size of these conferences now, and the schedules rotate. But going in that you're going to have some of those games. You don't have to worry about what programs are up and what programs are down as much because in your conference you figure some of those programs are going to be up and you're going to get them all anyway. For BYU, they kind of have to cherry pick 6, 7 years down the road sometimes, and it's all projections. It's so hard to tell. And also, as you said, they've got those 4 games, but these other conferences, and they're playing 8 conference games, some of them 9 conference games. It's really hard. It's a very weird kind of catch-22 situation for a program to be in.
Bob Wischusen, ESPN College Football play-by-play man, the radio voice of the New York Jets on BYU Sports Nation. Let's talk about the matchup tomorrow that you're calling between BYU and Virginia. Your colleague Matt Millen put BYU on upset alert. Why is BYU now becoming this popular upset pick for a lot of people that want to go out on a ledge and pick Virginia over the Cougars?
Well, I think it's really, and from Matt's standpoint, we watched a lot of tape yesterday. We did the Virginia-UCLA game at the start of the year. Virginia lost at home to UCLA. They lost by 8. UCLA scored 3 defensive touchdowns in the first half and hung on to win.
Yeah, I think the Cavaliers probably should have won that game.
They probably should have. I mean, all things being equal, how many times are you going to give up 3 defensive touchdowns at home?
Right.
I mean, that's a 1 in 1,000 kind of a scenario. So it's really because of their defense. They've got NFL players in their front 7. It's their offense traditionally has not been explosive, and this year it's going to fit that mold. They are not an explosive offensive team. So if Virginia can muck this game up, they can control the ball and keep BYU's offense off the field a little bit, give their defense a rest, because obviously with BYU wanting to run about 150 plays if they can, your defense can get gassed pretty quick. I would think that would be the game plan for Virginia, and that's a game plan they can execute. They can kind of misdirect you and control the ball offensively. And defensively, they've got guys that can wreck the game in their front 7. So that's why. It's a matchup that, you look at BYU, they don't really have any home run hitters probably outside of the quarterback on offense. So it's kind of a keep them in front of you offense and let your pass rushers, if they can control Taysom Hill and keep him in the pocket and make him a thrower and not a runner, you think you might be able to keep the score down and steal the game. It's one of those matchups that kind of, if you're Virginia and you want to try and beat a ranked team on the road, this is the kind of team that they would have a chance to beat. And, it might be a closer game than some people expect.
Sure. I think BYU a 14-point favorite at home, which to me is a little much. I could see it going both ways, but I'm not sure. Interesting matchup. What sticks out to you on film about Taysom Hill?
Well, if you lose track of him, he's the one guy that can, obviously it's always the quarterback. because oftentimes the quarterback is unaccounted for, and if he escapes the pocket and your defensive linemen lose containment, there's the big chunk play. So to me, that's what this game is about, and that's what their offense is about. Really the biggest difference between the two teams, between BYU and Virginia, is Virginia doesn't have Taysom Hill. They have a quarterback that can stand in the pocket and throw it a little bit, but they don't have a quarterback that can run, and at least not like Hill. So to me, that's the X factor in the game. If Taysom Hill ends this game with 120 yards rushing, and say 3 or 4 of those carries are for 25 plus, where you think you've got him, you think you're about to make a big play, you're about to get a 3rd down and 10 stop, and he gets out of the pocket, and all of a sudden there he goes, and he runs for 30 yards, and kind of one of those back-breaking, momentum-changing 3rd down conversions. Those are the moments in the game that I think can change it for BYU. And those are the moments in the game that I don't know Virginia has the personnel to change it in their favor. So that's why, to me, the most interesting matchup in this game, and I told you that Virginia's got those NFL-level players in their front 7.
Yeah.
Can those guys, A, rush Taysom Hill, but B, and more importantly, rush him with the discipline to keep him contained if they don't get to him? And that's hard to do. All of a sudden, a tackle kind of gives the defensive end the up-the-field move because it's kind of by design. That's the way the protection goes. And that defensive end gets too far up the field. Now, all of a sudden, Taysom Hill's got a little crease, and it's a jailbreak, and there he goes. And, Virginia does not have that element in their offense at all, and BYU does. And that one factor alone, assuming turnovers aren't a huge factor, that's always the number one factor, it seems, in winning or losing these games. But if turnovers are even and Taysom Hill has some big runs, this is going to be a really hard game for Virginia to win.
Bob Wischusen, ESPN College Football play-by-play man, will call the game on ESPN tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern, 1:30 Mountain Time kickoff between the Cavaliers and BYU. He's conditioned himself for the elevation. Also, you may have the greatest Twitter handle ever at ESPN Bob.
Shocked nobody took it.
Bob Lee didn't want it.
Thanks, Bob.
All right, guys, I'm feeling a little lightheaded, so I'm going to go get the oxygen now.
Very good.